Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday. It's 10 o'clock. I'm Tim Harris. It's time for 10 with Tim. We do this every day, Monday through Friday, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you find podcasts. And we go verse by verse through the Word of God together. And if you're new, we are so glad you're with us. We're trying to go through the whole Bible. We've done a lot. We've got a little bit to go. And we are going through the Gospel of Mark right now. Loving it. It's really, really good. And today, Mark chapter 12, starting a new chapter. Mark chapter 12. Verses 1 to 17. Let's start with verse 1. Remember yesterday, all of the representatives of the Sanhedrin, not the whole Sanhedrin, but the leading priests, teachers of religious law, the elders, it's a representatives of the Sanhedrin. It's not an official interrogation, but you can tell they are officially concerned, and so they send their counsel to go vet this renegade teacher named Jesus who was causing trouble in the temple. They asked him the question about authority. They asked, what makes him think he can do what he's doing. Jesus asked them what they thought about John the Baptist, where his authority came from. They realized, wow, that's a loaded question. There's no good way to answer that. So then Jesus didn't answer them. But then chapter 12 picks up and says, then Jesus began teaching them. I think the clear indication there is that this story is for them. He doesn't answer them directly, but he answers them with this parable of judgment. And I believe this because at the end it says the religious leaders wanted to arrest him because they realized he was telling a story against them. So they are the listeners. So Jesus doesn't answer their question directly, but he does roll a parable in here like a stink bomb right in the middle of their mess. So this is an amazing parable. Let's talk about it. A man planted a vineyard. He built a wall around it, dug a pit for pressing out the grape juice, built a lookout tower, and leased the vineyard to tenant farmers. Jesus is intentionally using language and details from Isaiah chapter 5. You remember when we did Isaiah together and we read in chapter 5 there, the Song of the Vineyard? Jesus is using that Song of the Vineyard to spin this parable. Now, in the Song of the Vineyard, clearly, the vineyard was representative of God's people, of Israel, and of course the vineyard owner was God. So Jesus is using that Old Testament song of judgment to create his parable of judgment here with that same imagery, that same idea that the Old Testament scholars here are going to be very, very familiar with. They know what Jesus is saying and doing here. So Jesus uses this story of, developing that Song of the Vineyard. At the same time, this is a very common, the situation that Jesus describes here is common at this present moment in his history, in Jesus's day. Galilee was sort of taken over with these gigantic landed estates, with absentee owners, owners living abroad. And then you have the displaced and dispossessed peasants who were left to work the land that they can't ever own, And so it stirs up a lot of tension, a lot of hatred, a lot of class, conflict, but between upper class and lower class. And so Jesus, again, takes two things here, the Song of the Vineyard, and then this very, in your face, present, social sort of situation, and creates a masterful parable here of judgment against the religious leaders. So at the time of the grape harvest, the master sent one of his servants to collect his share of the crop. The word that's used there in other places in this sort of, when it's describing this very sort of situation, often it's wine. It'd be kind of difficult to go get grapes and then, track those back to wherever the owner is. So chances are he's trying to claim some of the wine from the vineyard. But the farmers grabbed the servant, beat him up, and sent him back empty-handed. They ran his pants up the flagpole and, sent him back embarrassed. The owner then sent another servant, but they insulted him and knocked him in the head. I'm sorry, that's something my grandma would say. Man, don't you be out there after dark. Somebody gonna knock you in the head. So anyway, they knocked this one in the head. like my grandma would have told him. The next servant he sent was killed. So notice how their defiance and their violence escalates every single time. The next servant was killed. Others he sent were either beaten or killed until there was only one left, his son, whom he loved dearly. Now, what Jesus is doing here, obviously, is exposing their plans to kill him. And it's a masterful stroke of judgment here on Jesus' part. The owner finally sent his son, thinking, surely they'll respect my son. But the tenant farmers said to one another, here comes the heir to the estate. Let's kill him and get the estate for ourselves. Again, that's the kind of thing that would have happened. If the son shows up, they think, the old man's dead, the owner's dead. And so now the land could belong to the first comer, whoever claims it, if it's an ownerless property. So they're thinking, all right, here's this son. The old man must be dead. We'll kill the son. It'll be ownerless property. Then it'll be ours. Again, Jesus is using exactly the kind of situation that would be in Galilee of the time and the kind of social tension. And it's amazing. What do you suppose the owner of the vineyard will do? Jesus asked. I'll tell you, he'll come and kill those farmers, lease the vineyard to others. Didn't you read in the scriptures? The stone that the builders rejected. Again, he quotes at this point Psalm 118, I think. Psalm 118, the stone that the builders rejected has now become the cornerstone. Now the Lord's doing it. It's wonderful to see. The religious leaders wanted to arrest Jesus because they knew he was talking about them. Ooh, yeah. So it's this parable of judgment that says, those who would kill the son, they're going to face incredible judgment. On top of that, there is that scripture from Psalm 118, but there's this amazing kind of detail in the construction of Solomon's temple, which these Jewish leaders would have known about. There was a stone that was going to be used in the building of the sanctuary that was cast aside as a reject stone that was ultimately used as the keystone for the porch. And so they know that detail. And again, Psalm 118 isn't, I don't know if it's talking about Jesus, but at any rate, it's an interesting kind of historical detail that they would have known about. One more. Later, the leaders sent some Pharisees and Herodians to trap Jesus into saying something for which he could be arrested. Since Jesus' word is the sign of his authority, and since it's his words that the crowds hang on, and his authoritative deeds, they're trying to find a way to get Jesus to just say something dumb. If he can put his foot in his mouth, if he can possibly have some unguarded moment when he says something that they can get him for. And so they keep trying to test him in that way. Jesus knows exactly what they're doing. So they say, teacher, we know how honest you are. You're impartial and you don't play favorites. You teach the way of God truthfully. So now tell us. So they're laying it on thick. They're trying to corner him. And this is actually a pretty good test. The paying of taxes. Obviously, the Jews hate the fact that they are, occupied by the Romans, that they're dominated by the Romans. They hate that. On top of that, the Zealots refuse to pay taxes because they think that is to acknowledge that they are dominated by Rome, and they refuse to even acknowledge that Rome owns them. So the Zealots, absolutely do not pay taxes or totally against taxes, and that's a good number of people. The Pharisees, on the other hand, they hate it too. They resent it, and they find it humiliating, but at the same time, the Pharisees can justify it and they pay it even though they hate it, With that, the Herodians, man, they're all in. Again, these are Herod's people, so they're all in. And so Jesus is kind of in a spot here. If he speaks theologically, he's probably going to get trapped. If he speaks politically, he's probably going to get trapped. And since this is such a contentious issue and everybody's listening to what he's going to say, it's almost impossible that he's not about to probably alienate a third of his audience no matter what he says, or that's what you think. But notice what Jesus does. Jesus saw through their hypocrisy and said, why are you trying to trap me? He knew exactly what they were doing. Why are you trying to trap me? Somebody bring me a coin. Okay, I like that. Because it shows you that Jesus didn't have any money, He didn't carry money, He just says, hey, well, somebody bring me one of those coins. You had to pay the coin in Roman, I forget what it was, was it a denarius? Caesar's coin. What did Jesus say? A Roman coin, a denarius. Yeah, it's a denarius. I'm sorry. So he brings them a denarius that's got Caesar's picture on it, right? And so Jesus says, just tell me whose picture's on that, And they say, well, Caesar's picture's on it. Jesus will give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. The guy his face on it must belong to him. What Jesus is doing there is showing, number one, you got it in your pocket. Somebody show me one, and they all start pulling out their money. Like they all carrying money. And so Jesus just exposes their hypocrisy here by saying, you spend his money at Target, you spend his money at Starbucks, you spend that money at IGA, you spend that money all the time. Obviously, you ain't got no problem with it, so don't act like you got a problem with it when it's time to pay the taxes. If you spend it at Target, if you use it everywhere else, you can just pay it when it's tax time because there it is. It's got his face on it. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. Man, I love that. And, man, those guys just, dang, they're so mad. They're just so mad because Jesus completely amazed them. And Jesus is, man, he's just so good at this. They had no idea. Their brains couldn't have wrapped around an answer like that, never, let alone just, say it. But Jesus, man, that's brilliant. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. In that statement, Jesus, of course, basically admits or permits some authority for government over our lives. There's some claim that they have, and so give to them what belongs to them. But at the same time, you don't give to them what belongs to God. You give to God what belongs to Him, and He owns our souls, right? So let's pick up right here tomorrow. Again, they're going to keep on meeting him in the temple courts and the temple porches, and he's just going to keep on giving it right back to them. Tomorrow, a question about resurrection and the most important commandment. We'll pick up right here tomorrow, chapter 12, verses 18 to 34. Mark chapter 12, verses 18 to 34. It's Wednesday. It's a beautiful day. Prayer meeting tonight at Woodburn. I can't wait to see our folks. I love you guys so much. Have a great day. Stay in the Word, and I'll see you in the morning, Lord willing, 10 o'clock for 10 with Tim. Have a good Wednesday.